UEFA actually came out with a statement earlier today, and they basically said, this is a mockery. The rules are the rules.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. So today on the show, the soccer world is seeing red after FIFA decided to allow U.S. striker Folarin Balogun to play in tonight's World Cup match, despite a red card in the last game. What role did President Trump play? Plus, Russia has launched another series of deadly attacks on the Ukraine capital Kyiv ahead of the NATO summit. Why getting the defense missiles that President Zelenskyy needs desperately right now is a hard ask. Up first, though, hundreds of thousands of Iranians flooded the streets of Tehran on Monday for the funeral procession of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Khamenei and several of his family members were killed in targeted airstrikes launched by the U.S. and Israel on February 28th. The crowd at his funeral procession held signs and chanted slogans expressing their anger at the U.S. and Israel for the Supreme Leader's killing. Meanwhile, talks between the U.S. and Iran to end the war are on hold until the funeral proceedings finish on Thursday. So what message is Iran sending with this massive funeral? And could the anger towards the U.S. complicate the next stages of these peace negotiations? For this, I want to bring in Richard Engel, NBC News chief foreign correspondent. He's been reporting on the funeral processions from the ground in Tehran. Hey, Richard.
Good to join you. How are you?
I'm good. It's great to have you. You went to Iran before this war began, and this is your first time back. How are you seeing things differently right now?
So, I've been over the last 12 months or 15 months to Iran, maybe half a dozen times. And I'm noticing a major difference now since the end of major combat operations. The government is much more confident. There were hundreds of thousands of people on the street today. The government is talking about millions of people. I think that's very possible. This is not just a funeral. This is a political rally. This is a way for the government to show that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel failed, that they are still in power. And in many ways, they are in a stronger position than they have been in many years. That doesn't mean that the government is universally liked. Absolutely not. It's deeply divided. But the government supporters feel more emboldened, more confident, and I could see that over the last several days.
So you're seeing a renewed strength amidst the government officials, amidst support, it seems, for the government in the streets. And it's important to note that the people that would show up for Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's funeral would be supporters, would be government officials. These are not the people that we would see in the streets protesting the government of Iran. And that has been what you've been exposed to. I know that there have been the anti-American slogans that we are used to hearing, death to America, Ma'bar Amrika, as they say it in Farsi. Those things have been chanted, as has been chanted in Iran in past history as well. You spoke to people. What are they saying about America?
You know, the death to America chants, I've heard them in Iran for years. They seem to be more impassioned now. Today, people were shouting it, and they were speaking it from their hearts. They were carrying posters with Trump's picture on it, with a crosshairs, like a bullseye on his forehead. Same thing with Netanyahu's picture. I spoke to a member of the Revolutionary Guard. That's very difficult to speak to members of the Revolutionary Guard. They very rarely speak to foreign press, particularly American press. And he said the war is not over. He said that the war will only be over when the blood of the supreme leader has been avenged. So the government that was in place previously was probably more moderate than this one, was probably in a weaker position than this one. The death to America chants were louder and more impassioned that I heard today than I have for a long time.
You also spoke to a woman. What did she tell you?
I spoke to a woman, and she just came up to me, and this happened several times. And she said that Trump should die, that Trump must be killed.
Kill Trump? I hear that message all over. You actually mean kill Trump? You actually mean that he should be killed?
No English. No.
But kill Trump, that's your message.
Kill Trump.
And there were posters that people were carrying around that said, there will be blood. And I had pictures of Donald Trump on them. So there's a lot of anger that is being directed personally at President Trump. And people told me that they don't have this same sort of anger toward the American people, that this anger is directed toward the people who led this war, that it's not anti-American anger in general, although it's death to America, but they're saying what we mean is death to American imperialism, death to the international world order dominated by the United States and Israel from their perspective.
You mentioned in speaking with this woman that was in this funeral procession and speaking with this member of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is unprecedented to hear from someone like that, that they want to avenge the death of Khamenei, of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And in doing that, to them, that means targeting President Donald Trump. Could there be an issue with negotiating a permanent end to this war when you have people inside of Iran that don't want to see a real end to it until those types of things are carried out?
Yes, but not necessarily. So the Revolutionary Guard today at the funeral, standing next to the casket, of course, people's blood is running hot. Of course, people are making these kinds of slogans. These posters with Trump's picture on them and a bullseye, they've been handed out by the government. It's not that these are being made by individuals. These are not homemade signs. These are printed signs that the government is handing out. So this is a message that the government is actively encouraging. I don't know if there's any indications that they're going to make good on them. And the government is also engaged in active negotiations to try and end the war. So how much of this is bluster and how much does Iran really want to start the war again? I don't get the impression here that the government wants to restart the war. I don't get the impression that they want to go back to full-scale conflict with the United States or Israel. But I also, in speaking to people on the ground and speaking to government officials, get the absolute impression that they're not convinced it's over, that there might be another round, that Israel might try and carry out another attack. They're not entirely sure that it will happen.
Richard Engel, we appreciate you being there for us. Thank you, my friend.
Absolutely.
So more than a dozen people were killed overnight in Ukraine's capital city of Kyiv. Russia launched a second major attack on the city in less than a week, according to officials there. The Russian strikes came just hours before the start of the NATO summit in Turkey, where Ukrainian President Zelenskyy is going to ask leaders again, including President Trump, for more firepower and defense missiles. So how are the Ukrainian people withstanding these ongoing attacks? And what is Zelenskyy going to do if he doesn't get what he wants? For this, I want to bring in Illia Ponomarenko, a journalist formerly with Kyiv Independent and an author based in Ukraine. He's currently in Bucha, just outside of Kyiv. Welcome, Illia.
Thanks for having me. Hello.
Hi, Illia. Thank you for being here. So I want to talk about the most recent wave of attacks in Kyiv. What has been happening there?
What was happening was the very loud and very terrible rolling thunder in the middle of the night that rolled throughout Kyiv's suburbs for many, many miles, including my place here in Bucha. And I live about 10, 15 miles away from the populated area of the city. So what was happening was yet another massive act of murder that happened about a week after the previous one that left 30 people dead. Now we're talking about 15 people dead. And the work continues, the rescue work continues. Another 15 people buried under the rubble of their own homes in the middle of the night. Because Russia can't do this, because of terrible, essential critical lack of air defense, and Russian understanding that there's a very huge window of opportunity for its ballistic missiles to attack Ukraine and to kill Ukrainians, particularly in Kyiv. They have focused on Kyiv in the recent weeks.
Let's talk about Ukrainian air defense missile systems. President Zelenskyy wrote in social media that Ukrainian forces were struggling to intercept Russian ballistic missiles. What is the status of Ukrainian air defenses?
The Ukrainian military managed to find the ways to counter Russian cruise missiles, swords of Russian drones. But when it comes to a very specific thing as ballistic missiles, which are a very different kind of a beast to kill Ukrainian targets in Ukraine. Throughout these years of war, the only instrument, super effective, but super expensive and super rare instrument to kill these ballistic missiles coming from Russia in scores, in dozens sometimes, are the factory interceptors from Patriot system.
I want to make sure that people understand what you're talking about. The only air defense systems that are capable of taking out a ballistic missile are Patriot missiles.
Essentially,
correct?
yes.
And Ukraine is running low on those Patriot missile defense systems.
It's been said, it's been almost officially said by people in the defense ministry that we have no more of them left. Zero, nothing.
So to be clear, Russia is attacking you and your country with a missile that you cannot shoot down.
The latest attack on Kyiv that happened last night that we're talking about, it was made no secret that we have no interceptions at all over city when it comes to ballistic missiles.
So President Zelenskyy actually has been asking the president and Congress as well for more air defense systems. We know this. There has been no legislation, no other authorizations of major new aid to Ukraine in President Trump's second term. President Trump actually spoke with Zelenskyy and Russian leader President Vladimir Putin ahead of this week's NATO summit. Zelenskyy has described the conversation that he had with President Trump as, quote unquote, very good. What do you think, in your estimation, from what you've been seeing, from what you've been hearing, are Zelenskyy's objectives in this conversation with President Trump? What does he want? Does he want these air defense systems?
Oh, yes. We are 100% sure, and it's been absolutely clear and vocal from the President Zelenskyy side, from military leadership, that one of the top tasks in the list is, getting those interceptors one way or another. A huge problem, and everybody is very vocal about this, is the such weapons are in very low stock worldwide, in the United States included, following the Iran war. So it's a huge problem for everybody in the world to get these weapons. Essentially, given the fact that the United States produces less than 1,000 such interceptors a year. And it will take a lot of time and a lot of resources to expand the production if we want this. Another problem is that Ukraine and many other countries have been begging for years to provide us, for instance, Ukrainian producers or European manufacturers with licenses to produce copies of these weapons, which is again a big problem from the point of view of arms manufacturing and their own benefits and their own business interests, which is in case of positive political decision in the White House, it will take time to start producing them.
Can, though, the EU, can European nations, can they fill the void left by the United States?
It's a very good question. When it comes to Patriot missiles, we know for sure it was an open information that Germany donated these missiles. It's some amount of them. Poland, it's been revealed yesterday or today that Poland also had to share at least something. I'm not sure about, it's not an open information about the quantity of such missiles throughout European nations. It's possible, and this is what the Ukrainian leadership sits its task in.
How are Ukrainians feeling 4 years into this war?
I have this benchmark for myself, which I'm always using to assess, the situation around myself and answer such questions. So I'm always looking out and see if life goes on, normal life goes on around myself. If people get up in the morning and go to work, if cafes, shops, supermarkets keep working, if there is a civil order, it tells me that the Ukrainians are still capable of going on with this, of withstanding this. But of course, such attacks, brutal attacks, demonstrative attacks on houses with lots of people, with entire families being buried under the rubble of their own apartments in the middle of the night. Of course, that enrages a lot of people. Russians and the Kremlin personally, they probably think that such a missile terror is the way to intimidate Ukrainians into surrender and into accepting Russian terms and such. But the problem is, and it never works throughout history. Civilian terror only demonstrates what is at stake, who is the aggressor, what they're capable of, and what they are doing to us. It only shows people that this is what we are fighting for. This is what we are enduring, because this is what stands.
Illia Ponomarenko, thank you.
Thank you.
So there have been a lot of crazy games and Cinderella stories at the World Cup. But the big controversy right now is not over a goal. It is over a red card. So in the U.S. game against Bosnia-Herzegovina last week, the U.S. won, but American striker Folarin Balogun got a red card and was supposed to be suspended for tonight's matchup against Belgium. Then on Sunday, FIFA reversed that decision. President Trump says he asked FIFA to review the call.
And that wasn't a foul. That wasn't even an infraction. That was two guys running full speed that happened to crash into each other.
But he denies having anything to do with FIFA's ultimate decision. Still, the soccer world is in uproar. So I want to bring in NBC News sports editor Greg Rosenstein for more on this and what else to watch. Hi, Greg.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I got to talk about this call. So I was watching this game, and we watched this replay over and over again. Walk me through what the play was and why the call was made.
Well, both players were going for the ball. I think if you watch a replay and it's slowed down dramatically, it might look like Balogun is, almost intentionally sticking his cleat out there and clipping the back of Bosnian's player. But, I think if you were watching it in real time, it was pretty quick, bang, bang play, two guys going for the ball. And obviously, if you're looking a different way, you're not looking right at the opposing player, you might have that happen. So that's why it was very controversial, because some people say, the rules say if he ends up taking his cleat and, hitting the ankle of the opposing player, he should get a red card and be suspended for the next game. But other people say, maybe the crime didn't deem the punishment.
Do we know if the president asking them to review the call had any influence on their decision? That's
a great question. He did make a call to Gianni Infantini, the FIFA president. They are close friends, and, Trump is obviously a very powerful person, and he could be influential. So I could see him making a call and saying, hey, you guys got to really review this. And, the disciplinary committee going back and checking it out. At the same time, because it was such a controversial play and a red card that affected, the next game for the team, the disciplinary committee may have checked it anyways and ruled the same way.
Has FIFA ever done this before?
So it's mostly unprecedented, but not the only time it's happened. And this exact rule was used in late 2025 with Cristiano Ronaldo. He's one of the greatest players of all time. He's Portuguese superstar, and he had a 3-game suspension, and the FIFA ended up reviewing it using the same rule that happened with Balogun, and they changed the suspension from 3 games to 1, basically allowing Cristiano Ronaldo to play in the World Cup from the start. So that was also controversial at the time, because it kind of looked like FIFA just wanted, one of their biggest superstars to be in every game, but it has happened in the past, but it's very rare.
How are folks responding? Because, this is a controversial call after all.
I'm trying to remember what Belgium said. I believe the word was like astonished. They were shocked at the decision that was made yesterday. And, their coach came out and said, is it April Fool's Day? They're really upset with what happened. Obviously, U.S. was going to lose one of their key players for their matchup against Belgium. So I think it's going to be a very tough matchup regardless. Belgium has always been one of the top contenders. A lot of their biggest stars are maybe a little later in their career. If you looked at 4 or 5 years ago, some of these stars were, really at their peak. Now it's not as much, but it's going to be a really tough test.
And it's interesting because Belgium isn't the only country that's upset or team that's upset. It's also the European Soccer Federation as well.
Yeah, UEFA actually came out with a statement earlier today, and they basically said, this is a mockery. The rules are the rules. He earned a red card. They should not be changing a one-game suspension, which applies to basically every other player in this one particular case. So yes, internationally, a lot of people are upset with this, but the American side obviously is happy they're going to get one of their stars back.
Yeah. Also hearing they said the integrity of the game is at stake. So there's going to be kind of a cloud hanging over this game tonight in spite of so many people obviously watching. And it could really make history for U.S. men's soccer, who have had a struggle up until this World Cup, which they're playing so phenomenally well. I want to talk about some Cinderella stories that we've been watching as well. So you had Norway beating out 5-time World Cup winner Brazil, 2 goals from rising star Erling Haaland, and then 3-time World Cup winner Argentina barely scraping by to beat Cape Verde. What should people know here in watching some of these matchups? And what are you going to be watching over the next few days or so as we've seen some of these potential upsets?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a fantastic World Cup because, sometimes you might have results where the top teams are cruising by against some of these teams. But the fact that Cape Verde almost beat Argentina with, arguably the greatest of all time, Leo Messi, that was a great game. I will say Haaland, as you mentioned, he is a superstar player, and he's recently been a great player for Manchester City. He's on Norway. He comes in and he's a big guy, long hair. He fights, right at the goal, has an incredible finishing ability. And, if they keep it going, Haaland is really going to cement that superstar status.
Where does U.S. go next if they win tonight?
So if they win tonight, they will play Friday night in Los Angeles. They play the winner of Spain and Portugal.
What do you think? Do they make it to Friday?
I am trying to be optimistic, and I do think they squeak it out. I'm going to go 2-1
Really?
U.S. over Belgium tonight. Yeah, I just think this Balogun news, is just so monumental for the team, and you're getting your top striker back who has played really well in the tournament. You could look on the flip side and say maybe Belgium's going to be so upset about everything that they're going to come in with a real chip on their shoulder and show them who's boss. So and also, if Balogun goes out there, scores a goal, scores potentially the game-winning goal, there's going to be a lot of talk about, should this be an asterisk?
My gosh.
Or should that have even possibly taken place? So that's another angle to watch if he has a major impact.
Greg Rosenstein, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, that is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.